It's often rather shocking how classic literary works aren't actually all that good. Yes, indeed. Even back in the day, the establishment was shilling like awful books in order to push like political messages. Right? This is why so many books they show you in school are trash. This is why that nobody actually likes reading the classics, right? There's just so many better books out there. And obviously, like, I've talked a lot about this subject. There's a lot of books I don't really like. And I do think, as of right now, I am very confident in saying that, like, I do not like Dune. Okay, I'm at that point now where I've read the original twice. I'm going through the sequel. I'm thinking about it more. I'm like trying to process the themes and ideas, and it's safe to say that Dune is completely dry. Oh, there's nothing of substance there. It's a completely barren ocean, because it's an Arrakis is an entire desert planet. Like, there were things I liked about the original Dune. Like I liked how proactive Paul was as a protagonist in spite of his age. I liked kind of the vibe they were going for. Some of the aspects of like him taking over the empire were kind of cool, but like as a whole, like I felt like Dune is just a just was not really like a complete work. Like to me, I feel like Dune just didn't really get its point across in that first book. Like I really think if you're going to talk about Dune as like a brand, you really need to like talk about Messiah specifically as to like, what this was all building up to, what it all means, the whole themes of Dune, and by association, understanding why it's not a good literary work. Like this idea that like like your leaders aren't good people. It's like it's just a gigantic cope. Like you cannot dismiss accomplishments of people based on like things that happen later that may or may not be in their control. Like it to me it just seems like this idea that like ooh bad things happen, ooh but people put Paul on a pedestal anyway. It's just doesn't really work for a lot of reasons. I think most particularly is like the weird association with like this is one of my things with Dune is that like it reminds me a lot of Star Wars in that sense in this sense where like it's not really sci-fi, like it's more of a fantasy thing, a fantasy archetype, the dark messiah, it it doesn't really resonate with like the science fiction aspect at all. Like I don't see this being the future. I don't see this being like a realistic outcome of like of an evolution of our political system. I don't see like this as like real sci-fi. Like it's pure fantasy, right? You even have like it just to me just doesn't really like fit the genre, right? It just feels like it's trying to be something it's not, with all of its talk of like ooh like the worms, ooh the ecosystem, ooh water. It's basically just treated like a fantasy story. It really absolutely is. And this is important because like Huber seems to want to like present this as like some serious like socio-political commentary on this idea of like putting leaders up on pedestals, and it just doesn't work at all. And I found myself thinking, reading this book, I kind of thought of like, a better example, a piece of famous uh, literary work that handled the same kind of idea but way better. Like I really feel as if Griffith from Berserk is a better like Paul Atreides in this sense because like the idea of being the false Messiah, like Paul just kind of is the Messiah, right? Because like, ooh, the Fremen believe he is, ooh, as opposed to like Griffith, who literally is the Messiah, literally is chosen by God in the context of the story, literally is fated to like, become the God hand and do all this stuff. And like, you see what that means in the context of the world of Berserk. Him, establishing Falconia, beating back those like the the Kushans, right? Like beating those people back, like going up against them and like demonstrating that he is the savior of Berserk. That really puts into context, Griffith's kind of like weird, like portrayal in the story, where Gus thinks he's a complete monster and hates him and wants him dead, while like the general population, think he's the savior, that he's their guy, and like you see this progression. In Dune, there is no progression. In Dune, Paul is like, he's Mod Dib because like, ooh, they say he's Mod. Like, there's no real build up to it. It just kind of happens, like as opposed to Berserk, which really takes its time to set up like, the context, it really sets up, Griffith's rise to power and then his downfall and then his rise again and then his return to the realm of mortals and like what he does after he comes back, like this, you know, it works so much better because you see the messianic trope, like the idea of the Messiah in Griffith, right? You understand why people find him as remarkable as they do. With like Paul, like everything that happens is just extremely contrived. It's not as well thought out. It's not as well put together. It's not as well executed, right? Like it just doesn't make sense in the context of the setting. Like to me, uh, I think that it would be uh, the entire concept of Dune. Like the idea that like ooh, Auric is control. Like it's just I don't think a planet like that would have the resources to kind of to combat like ooh the universe. Like I think like the again it's been a while since I read the original, but yeah, it's because they have the spice, right? Like the spice and it like it's just a plot device. It's just a contrivance to like explain why they have so much like influence and why they're so relevant in spite of being like uh, a complete shithole. Like to me, it's just not as engaging. It's just not as well put together. It just doesn't resonate with people as much. And I do think it's very telling, about Dune's legacy. How even like the most hardcore fans tend to agree that like the books decline in quality as they go along. To me, like I feel like people read the first Dune, like completely misunderstand it, and then go into Messiah, and then they're just like, ooh, Paul does bad things. It's like, come on, like come on. It's not well executed. It's not interesting. I'm not even like really all that interested in finishing the book at this stage. Like I feel like I've read enough at this point to kind of understand Dune, to understand its audience, to understand the mindset behind like this thing's phenomenon and this thing's like cult appeal. And yeah, it really is like the Star Trek thing. It really is like the Star Wars thing. Like everything else that's popular among the masses. It's just misinterpreted by low IQ retards who can't handle anything more sophisticated, Like Dune is not special. It's not interesting. It's not engaging. I'm not interested in I don't believe this series has really left all that much of an impact on society. And that also goes to like one of the series that this was inspired that this book inspired, Star Wars. Star Wars has done absolutely nothing like to contribute to society. It's not some like amazing, well thought out like cinematic thing, right? It's just a movie. And Dune to me is just like a slow, plotting, boring drama, political drama from a guy with a bigami fetish, right? Like this book is a complete joke.